Welcome to Doc's Lab and our third Master Series. Welcome to Doc's Lab and our third Master Series. This is our introduction to third Master Series, and in this introduction we're going to talk a little bit about this next and third Master Series and a little bit about what we've covered and why we're going into a third Master Series. First of all, the third Master Series is on becoming a master producer, and we will talk a little bit about that and why now. Basically, my channel, if you look at my channel, there is a whole lot of information and a whole lot of playlists trying to help you understand a whole lot of the basic and meat and potatoes things you need to understand when working with audio. So it's a pretty simple concept. There's a lot of videos on my channel, and you're definitely gonna have to dig around. I've made some directional videos, but all these videos are supportive of these Master Series. The first Master Series we went into, there's like 135 videos, and it's a long series. I tried to cover everything from recording to editing to mixing and to mastering and distributing everything so that you could really get a good understanding of the fundamentals and begin practicing them. That doesn't mean that you go through the series and all of a sudden you're a master audio engineer. That's obvious, but to put you in the direction of where you need to be focused on so you understand that. And all the things we talked about don't get implemented all the time. You know, there are options. There are things you should check and consider and then move on. Right? At the beginning of the series, we had an introduction, and we talked about understanding your equipment and your processors and the audio engineering concepts, what we talked about in the series. And there's tons of playlists on my channel for digging around about things that we run into and concepts and ideologies we run into that you need to research a little further to get a little bit better understanding of to apply in the videos and in the workflows that we're going through this series. Then we talked about taking your environment and space into consideration before and when recording, taking your environment into consideration when and listening to your productions, your organization, cleanliness, positivity, comfortable environment, things that you don't think are really that important, but they are. And then just getting prepared. After that, we went through the whole process of going through a production all the way to distribution. So it was a fairly, developed series that it wasn't made for Hollywood, but it really should get you going in the right directions. Any questions you had, you could have asked me, but you should be able to, with practice, you should be able to get a pretty good production done. In the second Master Series, we dug a little bit deeper. In the first 5 or 6 videos, we really talked about some really important issues that you really need to, consider becoming that next level master audio engineer to really help you slow down, pay attention, focus on your critical listening, honing your abilities, your opinion, getting comfortable and confident in your opinion. When you do things that I know what I'm trying to do, I'm going there. And understanding the concepts of what you're trying to do so that you know what you're doing, and then you get confident in how you decide to do it. Then we went into understanding mapping out harmonics, analyzing the audio, testing it, things like that. Then we went into looking at all our metering systems to have a good understanding of looking at them. Then we went in and took a look at the most basic fundamental things that I think you should really be focused on. When you get a really good composition that's been arranged really well, and you've got really good performances from all the musicians, and you get really good captures, then you clean everything up and filter everything out really well. You have a production that can stand on its own, that it's good stuff. Then you can do audio engineering magic with that. And some of the most primary fundamental focuses, the things you need to focus on, are your equalization, your spatialization and reverberations, and your sound sculpting to fine-tune things, especially things that are farther out front in the mix. And to get you thinking about that way that you've got great stuff that you just start mixing together and blending together. And we talked about at the end of the video about how you are going to want to think about things like your effects, when to use them as just as accents. Don't over-process things. Don't let the production stand on its own, and be a good production, and don't over-engineer it to death, then you're not being that next level master audio engineer. Your job as a next level master audio engineer is to make sure those other things are done, and then you fix stuff. You can enhance stuff, and then you make sure you fix problems, that you're having, and, get things, get a picture of where things are supposed to be sitting in the mix, get an arrangement laid out, and then start mixing it together. And it's a pretty simple process. When you get into the mastering, there's a few things you have to deal with, but we talked about that pretty thoroughly in my first master series. And then distribution is really going to be a step process in who you're distributing to, where you're distributing to, who you're distributing with, who's all involved in the process that can change that whole thing a little bit. But I gave you some pretty good direction to get started. Basically, the production engineer, if we look at, basically what producers, record producers, and what was before that was A&R people for record labels, that they were basically in charge of the entire production. And there was lots of different producers, all kinds of different producers that dealt with the record labels, that dealt with the artists, that were vocal coaches, that were compositional coaches, that were, band coaches or public relations or all kinds, relations with the studio, Lots of different producers. Executive producers, the producers that, the actual producer that is for the label or for the band that oversees everybody. It gets a little complicated. So I kind of wanted to clear it up because being that my channel's set up to teach audio engineering, what we are going to do is become a production engineer. So there's a lot of things that a producer is going to do that's going to be dealing with budgets, public relations, time management, all kinds of things that are happening as a producer. We're not going to cover a lot of that kind of stuff. We basically are becoming a production engineer. That is that our job is to make sure that we have that power production that goes to get captured by the audio engineer. So that capture is done so well, the performances are done so well, the composition's done so well, the arrangement's done so well, all the things that make a power production are done as good as possible, so that when that capture is done, that you should be able to do a rough mix of it and have good sounding stuff to where you can just sound and go, oh yeah, that sounds great. Now let's do some magic with that. And as master audio engineers, we can make it better. It sounds great right now. It's a great composition, great arrangement, great performances. All the little nuances that make a power production are there. Song form is great, and it's captured, and it's like, oh yeah, that is so cool sounding, bro. Let's do some magic. So we're going to cover everything. We're going to the other side, becoming a production engineer, that we started basically from the point of it when becoming a master audio engineer. What we were trying to do in the last two master series, starting from recording to distribution and everything in there, wearing all kinds of different hats: recording engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, But that's one side of it. The other side of it is production engineer, making sure that you have that power production put together and all aspects that make a power production and a good production, dynamics, everything that makes that stuff good, so that it is something that can stand on its own on the radio. And, the great way to look at it is that, after that capture, getting those capture of those performances, that production can really stand on its own. You can do a rough mix of it right there, after you drag the files in, after doing all the recording of the captures, and listen to it, and it sounds pretty good. It sounds great. It's a great sound of production. It has all the good elements and great elements of a good power production, a great production, and then you're going to take it from there on the other side, the engineering side, and do magic with it. But we're focused on the other side. The other side is becoming the production engineer to make sure that you have that kind of production to give to the engineer, which would be you, right? So you're kind of taking these other shoes, but we're not going to put on all these shoes. We're not going to sit down and go put on all the shoes of a record producer. Does that make sense? Because I would have 5,000 videos, if I wanted to do it right. We are taking the role of production engineer and really focused on the song. Does that make sense? Or the album or whatever. All that other stuff is a different engineer or a different producer that you would be in charge of hiring, and it's like, somebody to deal with the budget, somebody to deal with the public relations, somebody to deal with the record label, somebody to deal with someone to deal with the venues or on and on and on, that we are focused a little bit more in. We're focused on the music. So we want to focus on the music, being that production engineer to get those power productions. And how do we get that done? What all do we have to do? So I just wanted to clear that up so as we get started in this series that you know what's going on and what the end product or the end hope of what I hope to accomplish is that by the time we get done with this, you can put that together so that when you go to take captures of your production, that it's a power production, that you can do a rough mix of it and it can stand on its own, and you're like, oh yeah, dude, it's great, it's awesome. Now I can do all this engineering stuff that Doc taught me or showed me, our options to do with it, on the other side. Does that make sense? And that's the hope of putting this third master series together, to help you get that kind of stuff so that you can really understand how when some big name mixing engineer you really like, or mastering engineer or whatever, and you're like, you just love his stuff, you'll have a much better understanding of what he's working with. Does that make sense? Because a lot of times they get, these people are great. They're the production engineers working with these artists who are phenomenal themselves, are great, and to get those power productions so that you hear that stuff you like so much, so that you might be thinking that you're the engineer you really like, did all this work to it. He really didn't maybe do as much as you thought. But if there was a problem, he would catch it. Does that make sense? So he was like going, yeah, all right, I can enhance that, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. Bap, 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 let it go, mix it, a little bit of compression, good to go, yeah, oh yeah, dude. Does that make sense? Because his job is to be that master audio engineer, to enhance things when he can, not over-process and process things to death, not kill the production, fix problems, edit problems that are issues if there's tuning, and if there's too many problems, redo things, catch it in that process that it should be done there, and then, mix that thing together to where it just came out sounding as great as possible, let it stand on its own. Let the power production that the production engineer brought to you speak for itself. Don't engineer it to death. That's not your job as a mastering audio engineer. Your job as a mastering audio engineer is to be able to understand when there's a problem, being able to fix it, and being able to enhance things, so you can make it a little bit better. But it needs to stand on its own. So you need to be able to understand how to get that. So that's what we're going to be working on. So get yourself ready. In the next video, we're going to actually get started. But I just wanted to clear that up so that you had some understanding and knew where we were going and could have a better understanding what I mean by production engineer. We're going to be focused on the music. We're going to be focused on the composition, arrangement, performances, possibilities, things that are happening, dynamics, and all kinds of things like that to get a good power production that can stand on its own. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this second video in our third master series, and I will see you in the next video.